Oh, that's just Prime. I think it's fair to say that Kingdom is basically Hasbro accepting that Beast Wars was, objectively speaking, a banger. I mean, it brought the franchise out of a really desperate slump while also bringing in a new generation of fans. To this day, people are still talking about the kind of impact that the toy line and the cartoon has had, which kind of makes me wish I actually watched it when I was a kid. I mean, if I was born a few years earlier, I definitely would have tuned in at the time. But I was born in late 1996, and by that time the first season was already over. So I couldn't exactly get on board with it as I had other priorities at the time, like figuring out how to walk and watching Thomas the Tank Engine. But now that I'm in my late 20s and I'm finally getting myself reacquainted with the Beast era, I'm also taking the chance to splurge out a little on the latest that Kingdom has to offer. So everyone gather around and please get your wicks out for Voyager class Kingdom Optimus Prime. So let's just get right into the gorilla mode. It's actually really good. Like, I don't claim to be an expert in simians or other such mammals, but it's still a pretty convincing approximation of Primal's primary primate mode. I mean, it may not be fully accurate to the screen model, but that's not always a bad thing, is it? Because it still has all the details needed for a really convincing monkey. Like, he is filled to the brim with etched fur molding across the entire body, and he made sure to get the wrinkles on the parts with exposed skin. I especially love it in the head as it gives it this sense of wisdom and grace. Really enjoyed how they picked out the pupils in the eyes too. Granted, it's not a perfect or complete looking ape. You can see this massive gap around the neck area that's more mechanically necessary for the transformation. And as soon as you get to the back, the illusion kind of loses a bit of the magic. This whole back section here is basically one giant panel to cover up what are obviously the robot mode legs. And while I can understand the compromises, I'm not entirely forgiving of the robot mode toes just hanging off the back of the feet. Though I do like how the ape mode toes actually become the robot mode heels, just like in the original toy. Now normally I'll go over the articulation for this guy because, you know, beast mode. But most of it's actually carried over from the robot mode, so we'll save it for later. What I will say, however, is that the head's on this unusual movement system, so it can nod, it can tilt, and it can also turn. You can even manipulate the joints to give him this high stance mode to replicate the look in the show. Though as often as Primal got beat up, I don't exactly remember him having Bay vs. Chicken knees. What are you, a Macross? But nitpicks aside, this is still a very nice little not Harambe. All he really had to do was just be a nice looking monkey. And it does that. Nothing but respect for my good guy commander. Optimus Primal, maximize! Transformation is about as simple as going from a primate to a humanoid would entail, but I find it a tad strange how the good guy has a more straightforward transformation while the main villain is a bit more involved and wackier. But Primal does have a few tricks up its monkey paws, such as this little armature here that holds the ape head and allows it to twist and turn to reveal the robo noggin. I mean, it is very basic, but I kinda love doing it. I actually want to do it again right now. But all joking aside, how does the robo mode actually handle? Really well, I'd say. Primal may be carrying on the spirit of the original guy, but he still puts a new spin on things. Granted, a lot of it was simply, what if Optimus Prime was a monkey? But he still carries on his own sense of charm and personality. I don't think the part that really sells that is the head. It is the traditional Prime bonds, but with the exposed blue lips and silver antenna ears, throwing the red eyes and the slightly pronounced head crest, so you're not exactly gonna mistake him for any other Prime in the series. And it's good that he has a vaguely Optimus-y face, as there's nothing else to really indicate that this is even a robot. Like, I don't know how many people actually know about this, or if I even brought it up in my Megatron review, but for the only parts of the Beast Wars toy line, Hasbro basically gave Kenner the job of doing the toy designs and the gimmicks. And because Kenner was more familiar with Masters of the Universe, so most of the early Beast Wars toy line had this bulky warrior hero vibe instead of a converting robots. But I mean, Primal does have some mechanical detail. Like, you have this nicely sculpted chest armor that looks like the Matrix of Leadership and the Maximo logo had a baby. You also have great use of red and white paint on the biceps and on the thighs. I especially love the red pistons on the feet that actually click into place during transformation. And if you look close enough in the back end, you can actually see the Prime Jets molded into place. Though I am a bit weirded out that the sculpting on the waist looks a lot like Sid from the Ice Age movies. Please don't ask me how I noticed that. Otherwise, the rest of the detail can best be described as a mad fella wearing simian armor. It's like if Tarzan went literal apeshit. I'm sure you've caught on that he's actually noticeably dinkier than most other Voyager figures. Just bringing in Ape Face for a second, you can see he's about a head shorter. But given that most modern Cybertronians in Beast Wars are supposed to be smaller than their ancestors, I guess it kind of makes sense. And if nothing else, he certainly makes up for it for some of the best posing in the entire toy line. Like, the shoulder joints don't just spin and hinge out, they're also on these butterfly joints. It gives them a lot more room to maneuver and, you know, allows for some chest-beating ape action. You also got some wrist swivels on top of some really deep elbows and opening fingers. And then you come to the hips, which has great range forward and back and out. Cheeky little hip swivel and at least a decent tilt at the ankle. But I will admit I do have a bit of a gripe with the knees. At least unlike Cyclonus, they actually tab into place and also have really good range. But the actual hinges are so tight that you risk untabbing the connection and leaving him with a broken leg. And I really do not understand the point of these calf swivels since they don't really add a lot. Accessory-wise, I'm sure you've noticed these shoulder blasters. You have the option of popping them out during transformation or leaving leaving them tucked in if you don't want him combat ready. But if you want him to go hand to hand, he also comes with these gleaming silver cyber blades, which you can either put in his paws or just tab them into the back. But if you want proper firepower, you can push the buttons on these forearms to reveal these arm-mounted shooters. So combine these with the shoulder cannons and you got plenty of blast effect options. But oddly enough, he doesn't do the whole weaponizer fossilizer thing. You can look all around him, but you're not going to find any ports to plug in Ractonite or Paleotrix or whatever fossilizers you got laying about. Granted, I don't really care about the whole combat system anyway, but he's got to be able to do it, right? And for the obligatory size comparison, I guess he and Megatron scale pretty well. Like, Primal was always smaller than Megatron in the cartoon, so I guess I'm glad to see that represented here. And I guess he scales alright with Rat Trap and Rhinox and all that, but that kind of goes without saying. And that's pretty much it. Can't really think of a closing monologue to explain why I like him, so let's just say I do. He looks good, poses good, aimbo's good, does the job. I mean, is he perfect? Not quite, but he's still fun and charming, and if nothing else, I'm happy to finally have an Optimus Primal in my collection. Glad you could join me, you damn dirty ape. Nonetheless, thanks for coming with me on this journey to avoid making a joke about a shitty looking kaiju movie that may or may not be out by the time this video goes up. But until next time, because there always will be one, this is Callum Lewis, the Media Hood, signing off.